if summer just kind of went gone. I was like, that was weird. Where did that go?
Yeah.
And then right now, like I said earlier, it's just like just damage control. It's just like trying to
Dealer superhero.
Dealer superhero. Okay, so Shaun Rains, dealer superhero.
Yeah, that's the name of my company.
Okay, cool. That's what we're gonna do. And then what we'll do is I'll just ask you for that kind of a lot of people know you, but for the people that are listening and don't know who you are, I'll just ask you for that 2-minute, origin story, and then we'll just get straight into the conversation.
Okay, that sounds good.
All right, cool. I'll get us started then. Hey, what's going on,
Sounds
Podcast
good.
Nation? How are you doing? Today I have my guest, Shaun Rains, dealer superhero. Shaun, thank you so much for taking the time to come jam with me today, man. I appreciate it.
Happy to do it. Thanks for having me.
Hey, Shaun, for, literally like the two people out there that don't know who you are, if you can just give us that quick origin story that is Shaun, and we'll just go ahead and get started.
Sure. Yeah. First, shout out to Canada. This is my Edmonton Starbucks.
Nice.
Services and products within the digital realm. But before that, I actually got into the car business. I met a girl, and
sounds like the beginning of a good country song.
College kind of thing. Didn't want to move back to where my parents were, and got a job in a parts warehouse. So that's how I got in the car business. I really never left the car business after that. And then the digital thing kind of started in the mid 90s, and met a guy. And so I was with Reynolds and a kind of a joint partnership that they had with Microsoft when I lived in Seattle. So I also had a kind of soft spot in my heart for Canada because lived close and went up to at least the BC side quite a bit back in the day. Anyway, then my career kind of took me from several years with the Reynolds website teams, digital marketing, into Reach Local way back in the day. In fact, dealer.com was our biggest client when I got to Reach Local, running their automotive team.
Nice.
And worked with Jared Hamilton in driving sales for a few years. That was awesome. I think a lot of people had met me in that era. And then I went to DealerOn, was the last larger sized company that I was with. I was with those guys for about a little over 4 years, and then left DealerOn getting close to 2 years ago. I guess this January will be 2 years since I left DealerOn. And then I started Dealer Superhero, which is essentially, two things. One, I was under a non-compete, so I used Dealer Superhero as a vehicle for a B2B business, because I'm one of the people that, if I'm going to go ahead and, try to be, ethical, I'm not going to violate my non-compete, which I did not. I used Dealer Superhero to work with smaller size companies that serve the auto industry, but not in websites and digital marketing, as to not be competitive. And then when the non-compete lifted, I've been working on some direct dealer service business, not specific to websites or digital marketing, but being able to make recommendations and kind of counsel and coach.
I like that. That's good.
Digital, not just existence, but the ability to thrive. So for a dealer who is like, man, I wish I had somebody that's been in this, that really kind of could navigate just about every turn and U-turn and unexpected thing that we might come across. I have a service that I use a couple of different tools for monitoring and measuring, a bit beyond just standard analytics views, to help that dealership. First and foremost, I really want dealers to become more accountable themselves. I think that's really, really important. And then number two, I believe that accountability breeds the opportunities to strengthen existing relationships with vendors, because then they'll really know if it's good or bad, or somewhere in between. And then also helps them hold those vendors accountable. And they'll really know how to do it. And they can't if they rely on people. I mean, Jason, you're clearly an expert in the field as well. And there's a lot of us out there. I should say there's quite a few people that have the ability.
There's a handful of us that care and actually do want to see people do better. Yeah.
Yeah. But you can't, pick any of our even friends, mutual friends that could actually provide that service to a dealer. There's still not enough of them to go around to all the dealers in North America that would want a person like that. Not that that's a bad problem to have if you're in that type of business, but the point I was kind of driving at is the dealerships are really empty-handed if they rely on just Jason Harris or Shaun Rains or pick anybody else to do all of that, because we can coach, counsel, guide, show them, we can lead horses to where there's a water source, but they still have to drink. And that's kind of where I want to, focus my effectiveness is how can I help dealers kind of get to that point where they even know where the water is. They don't need to be led there. Like, I got it. This is,
Yeah.
I think there's just this level of professionalism that the dealers yearn for and they really want to have. But I think that the entire, let's just call it the digital era, the internet era for dealers starting in, let's call it 98, maybe if we want to go back that far.
That's true.
It's come too fast for them to handle. So now there's a lot of kind of catch up. Anyway, that's an origin story plus a couple little extra points.
No, that's perfect. Do you ever find that you sometimes you kind of play like therapist to the dealership?
Yeah, sure. I mean,
like I've almost actually thought about putting that as a title of one of the things I do. I'm like, hey, dealership therapist. Just let me know.
Well, you could call it automotive retail therapy.
There you go, automotive retail therapy. But
there's a new podcast brand for
you. I know, right? That's actually a good one. I'm going to keep that one. But it's funny because you've been in the business long enough where, I mean, you remember the explosion of tech and new things. I mean, me and you had been we were sitting in dealerships, trying to convince a dealership to get a website. And they're like, no, I'm never going to need a website. Someone's going to always just come to my dealership. Like, I don't need this. Right. And now no one could ever fathom the idea of even opening a dealership without one. Technology, back then was so new, but it almost kind of seems like full circle. We've kind of come back around. We're in this next era, and there's just a lot of good stuff that I say. Then there's a lot of, just snake oil and crap, that's being sold. And it is super tough right now for dealerships to kind of navigate through that sea again. It reminds me, mid late 90s, early 2000s, it's just where things were just kind of, popping, right? And here we are almost 20 years later, and it's just kind of the same thing happening all over again.
Yeah, good points there. I have a relatively new client that part of my onboarding of a client is there's a whole bunch of information they have to share with me. Otherwise, I really can't help them. And one of those items that's very significant is, and I need to see their entire budget and what they're investing in terms of all of the digital things that they're hoping will result in, the acceleration of more vehicles sold, maybe more vehicles serviced as well. And I just had a relatively new client that I brought on that I think in day one, I was like, yeah, here's 10 grand you can save. And they're like, what?
Just like that.
But yeah, so your point about how, we're kind of coming all the way back around the circle, there's definitely some of that. We have had more than 20 years of like high-speed transition for this industry. Not just this industry. I mean, the internet, I refer to internet, especially in automotive, 1.0 was the internet itself. We didn't have high speed. We're using our phones to dial up. One picture to load into your used inventory took 17 hours. You might as well just go to sleep, wake up in the morning. Wait, hey, I've got one picture of a car. There were a lot of things that I think it was fair for dealers to think that the internet would be a fad. I probably more sharply criticize people that make dealers feel bad that they didn't know that the internet was going to be this, monumental change agent for the way they do business. Because, there were so many hallmarks of really like that would make it, if I were a dealer, I'd say, come on, like, you want me to take pictures of all my vehicles? I get that. I would love to show actual photos of my used inventory because that's where it started. Then it was, you should do it for your new inventory too. But in 1998, loading up a picture, oh my goodness, not just loading it yourself.
Kodak digital camera.
Yeah, nobody knew how to really compress images. But then the consumer experience, right? We talk about CX all the time now, or user experience. But the user experience, if you clicked on the search results of a used vehicle and then you wanted to see the details, and then especially if you wanted to actually see the vehicle, watching that loading of a picture that took so long, even as a consumer. So on both sides of the equation, it was I think, fair for somebody to say, really, this is going to disrupt the car business substantially. But fast forward, and I talked a lot about this. In fact, recently, um, well, I'll just hit the rewind real quick. Being out on the non-compete and not having to, there's two ways to look at it. One is it was kind of a relief in retrospect to not have to be talking about websites and paid search and SEO and all this digital marketing stuff for a year, because it gets exhausting. And because I was literally sitting on the sideline with all of that stuff, it really refreshed my perspective on what a bloodbath all of the digital marketing and website business really is from a sales perspective. I would
For
not
sure.
I would not want to be selling that stuff now. Not that it's not important, because it is,
Hmm.
but how many dealers in North America need a website because they don't have one, right?
Yeah.
So what's the open market opportunity for websites? Well, there is no open market opportunity for websites because everybody has one. So they talk about it's commodity. Well, it is very much commodity. So how do you say yours is better than the other? Anyway,
Well,
all of
it's
that
about
stuff.
shiny tools right now. I mean, literally, I sat down with the dealership this morning actually, and they're on their third website provider in 3 years, and I'm just like, what the fuck?
Yeah,
Why?
yeah, right.
I mean, it's a great dealership. It's just like it just seems to be. You know what it seems to be? It's just kind of like an overall total lack of strategy. It's like for some reason, either we did it as vendors or as agencies, is that we sold the idea that a customer experience was a product or a tool that you bought and not a
Mm,
strategy you actually set down and created.
yeah. Well, the dependency, and I think the belief that the internet would really, like, massively have a huge impact on sales acceleration, like more vehicles sold and all this. We're going to meet the needs of the internet customer, that kind of stuff. I think got a lot of people super excited.
Hmm.
But we definitely, and as we were talking just before we went live, I've been talking about process more than anything else. In fact,
Yep.
one of the companies that I work with is out of New Hampshire, called Strawlid. They're an outsourced BDC. I'm not, and they're not necessarily a fan of that term, because some
Sure.
dealers are like, I don't want to do that. I want to outsource that. But the way that they went about it and the way they built their company and the technology, there aren't very many outsourced BDC companies that really built a technology platform to, one,
Mhm.
make themselves more efficient than any dealership and their own salespeople, really, in their own BDC efforts could be. Strawlid was smart in that regard. But the other thing that blew me away when I first, and I know the guy that is the founder and CEO, I've known him for a long, long time. The other brilliant part about their technology on the process side is, okay, so we haven't really known, well, which of these investments are the good ones and which ones are really from a, hey, we
Good
got a
point.
lead, to what percentage actually get to appointment, and then more importantly, from lead to close.
Hmm.
Well, Strawlit's technology actually not only helps their people provide this perfect experience and perfect process, they're now executing a perfect process against every source, whether it came in organically through the website, paid
Yep.
search through the website, or whether it was Car Gurus, Trader, Cars.com down here, whatever. And now I've got, as a dealer, the insights to say, sorry, third party lead provider, you're actually the worst. And I have 4 of you in play, and I'm not executing a different process against your leads. Your leads just happen to be complete garbage. And now that gives the leverage that the dealer should have. It gives them the control to do that. So we've had all this stuff that's kind of blown up and went super fast as it relates to the internet, but
Yep.
we still are dealing with what I believe is a bigger problem, which is really the process piece, and that could be
Well,
broken
and
down
I agree with
typically.
you, right? I mean, I think for the most part, we've just it's like we've been looking for diet pills. It's just it's like literally where's the processed diet pill? Can someone sell it to me?
Mhm.
I'll take the blue one or the red one or the other. Let me just sell me the diet pill, right? It's not. No one wants to go to the gym. No one
Yeah,
wants
right.
to actually do the work. They just want the bloody diet pill, and
Yeah.
it's and it seems like for years we've kind of had these tools that have been able to kind of mask the fact that there was a lack of a process.
Mhm.
But now it's kind of come to a point where, we're entering into a season of plateau. I'm going to use the word plateau. I don't want to use the word recession because I don't want to be one of those podcasters that are like, it's a recession, everyone freak out. No, let's call it a plateau, right? I don't know. Do
Yeah.
you agree with that? Can we call it that?
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, so now we're going into this season of plateau that, yeah, we're not going to sell as many cars as we have sold in the last few years, So yeah, again, it's like it's this level of reactiveness. But what I've found, and I'm actually kind of curious to see if you found the same, is I'm seeing patterns, right? So over the last few years, the dealerships that were focused on developing out their process and creating a strategy behind why they're developing out a process, um, they're not the ones that are calling. They're not the ones that are freaking out. They're the
Mhm.
ones that are like, yeah, it's, slow down a little bit, but hey, we're still on par. But then it's like, the ones that just kind of relied on those diet pills for the last 3 or 4 years, they're the ones that are like, oh crap.
Yeah.
Like,
No,
do you
I
see
think
the same? Do you see the same thing?
yeah, so I do, and typically where I see the differentiation is um, a couple areas. One, a dealer that has never really fixed process, right? They're on the diet pills, right? They're looking for the keto diet for sales process and all things internet in their business. They definitely are the more on the panic side, right?
Yep.
We're rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic kind of mentality. And that's a scary place to be. I get it. And margins are razor thin, and especially on the new car side as for a franchise dealer. So I can see where that panic sets in. The side where you see some of these operators that don't get as panicked, you kind of dive into, well, what's your strategy, your sales strategy overall? Are you with a lot of the dealers that want to do well, we're forced to race to the bottom on price, so we'll dip into every single part of profit, even to the point where we may be losing money on cars, but if we hit these volume incentives, then we get what we want from the manufacturer in terms of we've got to hit a number. And
Mhm.
so if that volume incentive is big enough, they're playing the long game for that. Some dealers choose to do that. Others are like, we've got to make some gross on our vehicles, and so we're going to do that. And then that gets, depending on the market and how many people are not doing that versus you being the only one, you could be in a situation where it feels like you're getting beat all the time. And then you have the dealers who have also considered the other parts of their business and how valuable they are, which is, I think, the smartest way to professionally operate your dealership, which would
For
be
sure.
fixed ops is huge. We can't neglect it, right? Are we thinking about growth in fixed ops, and are there things that we could do better in terms of expanding our accessories sales? And then also the component of things like reinsurance, right? The
Mm.
dealers that have thought through that, and I've had conversations this summer with at least half a dozen dealers that have said, well, a couple of years ago, we started to realize that there's a more holistic picture of not just how many new, how many used sold, what service kind of look like, but what can we do in these other parts of the business, reinsurance being a big component. When the dealer gets into that side of the business, sometimes that ends up being the dealer that doesn't really worry about, well, the market's going to go up and down a little bit in terms of sales, but other profit centers within the dealership help bring some equalization to ride out the tougher times on the new vehicle sales side. And then and then the other component is there are some dealers that are realizing that their used car business, and specifically their certified pre-owned part of their used car business, is another area that's just not tapped quite enough.
And it's so true. I love the fact that you used the word kind of that holistic approach, right? And again, I agree. That's actually a pattern that I've seen. Right, is that the dealerships that they're rolling, they're doing their thing. Things are kind of there's no screaming or yelling, no skies falling, none of that stuff. Is that probably several years back they stopped looking at the business on this per department type level and really started looking at the business as a holistic thing, including even additional revenue streams, such as insurance and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
But there's still And Shaun, I can't tell you how many meetings I get into where it's like I got the service manager on one side, the new car manager on the other side, and the service manager wants to kill the used car manager. The used car manager thinks the service manager's a dick. The new car manager hates the parts manager, so won't sell accessories because he gouges them or doesn't give them any type of discount. It's a little, and then we're kind of sitting back, and it's like for some reason, like I hate to see it. I hate to say it, but it's almost like there were a lot of owners, and this is big group, small group, single points. I've seen this almost across the board. Is that the operational management style was one of let's ping these departments against each other. They'll push each other, and that's where we're going to get our profitability.
Yeah,
That's kind of crazy, right?
There's definitely some of that, and yeah, it's super crazy. And I think that also speaks to the bigger problem in that equation, at least in my opinion, is a leadership problem. And there are a lot of dealers that, I mean, I love dealers. It's like at the digital dealer conference last week, one of the first things that I said to the attendees in my room for my session was, I've worked for lots of companies, some that I really enjoyed. All of them, even the ones that I didn't enjoy, were beneficial to me, because I learned. But I don't work for anybody but myself now, and so I'm all in for the dealer. That's it. I just care about helping dealers become better operators, and I have learned some things in even this past year, that some of the dealers that I've reached out to that I've wanted to engage from maybe they can become a customer, like engage business. I realized that a lot of dealers that I talk to that I'm closest with are actually pretty good operators. And then there are the ones that are like, not so good. And I hate to say it, but some of them I think have been beaten down by the internet and all things internet for 20 plus years, that you get weary. Like, can you get back up one more time? How many times can you relearn? Oh, somebody else. And it could be happening from a very influential CRM leader, or somebody from your DMS provider, or somebody from your website provider, or your digital marketing provider, or some other influence in the industry that you really think that their voice is most powerful, but they kind of drift. Like, who's playing the flute, and are we following the Pied Piper, and are we going in the right direction? And when I see things like that going on, it concerns me, because I don't think that there's enough strong leadership that really, when we talk about that holistic, how should you really be thinking about your entire dealership? I don't think there are a lot of leaders that aren't inside of retail franchise dealerships to help them. I don't think there are enough of those people that really get that. I think people are very, very self-serving. I think that a lot of vendors have come up with solutions to problems that don't exist, but it's a cool technology. So, hey, why don't we have this thing that we need to have? Bots, like, really? Like, I get it. People want to talk about, we're doing all these things and we're super innovative and we've come out with this new shit. But it's like, did it really sell more cars? Because everybody backs it into, we sold more cars, all this kind of stuff. But where's the leadership to know whether or not they should check somebody at the door and say, man, I love you. I'm glad you guys are making new kinds of stuff. But the biggest problems I have at my dealership, that doesn't solve that problem. So unfortunately, now back to the leadership of the dealership, if they don't really know what their biggest problems are, if they don't really have goals established, we've got to fix these things or we're in trouble.
Exactly. No strategy, right? Let's just...
The absence of that strategy, plan, goals, all of those things combined, the absence of that makes a dealer really vulnerable to every single wolf wearing a sheep costume that wants to walk through the door. And I'm not a fan of that. Obviously, dealer superhero is like, I want to be the vigilante that kind of helps protect some of that. But there's a leadership problem too, and then that's difficult because most dealers don't have a trust network of people that they can really be honest with and say, hey man, I hate to say this, but I don't know the difference between SEM and SEO. And there are still dealers that really don't know that.
And they don't want to admit it. They're in a place that's, for them in their position, for them to admit that, they seem like it would be a bad thing. To your point, look, we got dealer 20 groups that are, pouring over the results. But at the end of the day, we know what the root cause of those results maybe not being what they should be is just it's just the lack of the leadership portion of it, right? So, I mean, I think both of us are in agreement, and we've seen it because it's just been a pattern for the dealerships that are doing well right now, is that there was either knowingly or unknowingly, all right, there was a strategy behind creating a leadership team. And then out of that leadership team births a holistic, strategy of how everyone's going to kind of work together. For the people out there that are listening and watching right now, and I think there are a fair amount that are shaking their heads, they're agreeing with us. You guys are right. I've tried every diet tool out there, every diet pill, and I'm kind of I'm getting tired of the diet pills. What would you say would be, if we would give them some actionable things? It's like, okay, no, you're right. It's my leadership. I want to go fundamentally start making changes next week in my leadership team. What would you say? What would be a few of things you say, hey, here's where you start?
Look in the mirror, start there.
It's good.
I say this, I have been saying this really since my departure from dealer on, and that whole time period of kind of reflection. I started saying this, hey, listen, I'm sure the mirrors are not broken in your dealership. And if they are, then just look at the one in your house before you walk in or drive into your dealership. The reason why that to me is kind of a powerful statement is because that's how I'm living my life, right? If I look in the mirror and I can't be honest with myself, how would I expect anybody to step into a room and listen to me talk about something? How would I expect anybody would even want to watch this podcast and really care what Shaun Raines has to offer in a conversation with Jason Harris, right? So I start with myself, and then that allows me to tell other people, start with yourself. And the reason why I say that, you're going to be like, oh, I am tracking with you, buddy. You're going to be sidecar my motorcycle right now. Because if you don't do that and you keep pushing off the personal responsibility that you need to take as the leader at that dealership, if you keep pushing off those responsibilities of knowledge and then doing something with the knowledge, even if you're not the expert guy, you don't have to be a web developer. You don't have to know how to go into the back end of your site and change up various pieces of your code for better search results. You don't have to do that. But if you don't have a base level knowledge of that and you keep pushing that off, here's the problem. You're empowering somebody probably in your organization and giving them a leverage that they probably shouldn't have. And have you seen, because I have seen, there are a lot of people that maybe they're the perfect person to help the dealership or the dealer group. That's great. But you're going to push that off to the point where their leverage is also going to be part of their own value that you're going to no longer be able to afford, because they're going to use the fact that you pushed it all off to them. They're going to use that leverage back against the dealership and parlay that into a bigger opportunity. And they're also going to think that they're actually more amazing than they really are, because you didn't actually take the responsibility. I lead this thing. And so then some dealer may be listening to this right now and say, yeah, that's easy for you to say. I don't get it. I hate computers. I've been in, Shaun, I'm 70 years old. I'm 65. I don't
even have a smartphone.
Excuses. If you're going to stay in any industry and it changes and technology pushes it into this new stratosphere, okay, you have to have a baseline knowledge there, or you can't complain if bad things happen. And bad things happen to dealers, and it still happens to this day, when they don't know enough that they have to depart or impart that, give it to someone else. And then you're perhaps, without even knowing it, you're giving somebody more leverage and control in the dealership than they maybe should have. And you don't know how to defend against it. Well, now what's going to happen? You're either going to have a hard time keeping that person. That person is going to be actually the one that's guiding the ship more so than you, spending your money. That's the part to me where I think it needs to be where, and so if a dealer's watching this right now, like, well, how would we do that? Reach out to somebody like me or to Jason Harris and say, hey, can we just have a conversation? Like, how would we do that? Because I would tell a dealer, try to use me for that, even if it's something where you don't have to pay me for that. I'm not just saying, hey, come and bring your business to me. But you need to find someone, whether it's a Jason or a Shaun or other, maybe another dealer that
Well,
is
it's a dealer therapist.
your trust network. It's your trust network, right?
Yes, exactly.
It's your circle of people where you can start to realize I can get smarter here. Like I need to be a part of something or have someone that allows me to get there, so that I'm not allowing that to happen in my business, because it's happening right now. There's tons and tons of people. Some of them get so successful in retail because they've learned analytics, and they're like, oh man, I uncovered all these things that I need to tell the world. And I'm like, everybody knows that. That's not that revolutionary. But the dealership thinks it's amazing. And then they parlay that into, you know what, I think I'm going to make myself into a celebrity in the automotive industry because there's so many stupid people. I'm going to be the king of the idiots. Like, we have a ton of that in automotive. And for me, a guy who's Yoda, not Luke, I've been in it for a long time, I can spot those people from a million miles away. And I'm like, okay, that's great. But I don't really care about those people so much. I care about, well, there's a dealer at the other end of that equation that allowed that to happen, didn't know that it was being allowed to happen, and hopefully that person has enough integrity that they would never use it against the dealer. But unfortunately, that happens a lot. And then the dealer is all the way back to square one. Like, oh my goodness, we got this rock star, superstar, superhero that worked for us, and now they're gone because they want to be a superstar speaker and start their own podcast. And it's like, what are we doing, man?
No, it's true. And in fact, actually, I mean, there's something you said that, I mean, I think really sums this up well, is that, if you're listening to this, you guys are shaking your head and you're agreeing with us, that's great. But Shaun, you said, being the captain of your ship. And to your point, I would agree. I am not meeting or sitting down with as many owners that I would actually call them the captain. Like they're not. There's someone else either in their organization that is steering the ship. And I've always, I guess, kind of struggled with that a little bit because, I mean, at the end of the day, it's you're the one that's signing the checks. I mean, yes, you need a good, first lieutenant, and you need a second lieutenant, and you need to have a great support team. I'm not saying don't remove that, but to your point, as an owner, looking ourselves in the mirror, taking back our accountability for ourselves and saying, am I being the captain that I should be right now? I think that's a great place to start. And, and I think just admitting, we know what we know what we don't know. It's when I meet those, it's usually that's the best. And yeah, it's that support team, man. You gotta connect with someone or find someone. It's I'm amazed how many LinkedIn in messages I get on a regular basis to say, "Can I just talk to you?" I'm like, sure, we call. And it's worked out great because I'm not a trainer, I'm not a coach. I'm just I'm actually the marketing guy. I'm the one that's really in trouble right now. But it's just I had a conversation with Chip the other day, and it was like it did not make sense for them to continue to invest into their marketing efforts at such an exponential rate when they weren't really investing into their team efforts.
Mm-hmm. Well, and sometimes good leadership or being the captain of your ship could look like, I've had this conversation with, I couldn't even tell you how many dealers. It could look like, hey, I'm the dealer principal. Okay, great. I need a general manager who's going to be that person. And so you can get down out of the dealer principal level into the GM level and even GSM level. But at the general manager level, there's still too many general managers that also kind of follow suit in the, I don't want to be the internet expert guy, whatever. I need people, whether it's because it's rarely actually nowadays, like at the dealer principal level that, they're actively involved. Oftentimes that's the general manager. But if it is the general manager who you're like, that's the captain of our ship, The general manager, I'd never say, hey, the expectation of you is to be a broad, well-rounded expert in all things digital and internet and all that. No, you don't have to. But you do have to have at least somebody who is uh, in a management role
Mm-hmm.
that you have thoroughly vetted, that's your like part of your trust network. Because if you don't have that, and this is one of the ways that I actually have gone to dealers and said, well, here's a role that I can play for you. If you don't have that in your organization, well, I've got internet people. I've got an e-commerce director. I love that title, by the way. I love them.
So they're like 15 different titles for that position, but yeah.
You got your internet people or whatever. There are still a lot of general managers that, being the captain of the ship, might mean that you outsource a little piece of, I need somebody that's going to actually be able to translate what's really going on here and help me understand what's really happening. There's a place for that too. That's kind of the place, one of the spots where I kind of play in. Not every dealer needs it. Sometimes it's the identification of, well, maybe you already have those people. If you do, great. But
Yep.
if you don't, then all the way back to my comments about you may be allowing something to happen slowly, but could be, devastating, pretty catastrophic to your business. Like literally could make you have to start all over again with, man, we were doing pretty good with all this internet stuff, and then it fell apart because we gave too much responsibility and then ultimately leverage to somebody that we shouldn't have trusted, not with that much responsibility.
It's like having this conversation. I keep thinking of that. What was that song? Is it Carrie Underwood that did it? She takes her hands off the steering wheel. It's like, Jesus, take the wheel, and it's
Oh
just
yeah,
like nobody
I
actually
think that
wants.
was
It was, I think
that
it
was a
was, but it was. Hey, it's almost like I kind of feel that at the dealerships. I can see it as the theme song, as the dealership. It's just like nobody wants to put their damn hands on the steering wheel.
yeah.
And so for dealerships out there, because I also find that I think there are dealerships out there that think someone does have their hands on the steering wheel, but in reality,
Mhm.
like to your point, we'll go in there, start poking around a little bit, doing kind of our thing, and realize no, not really. There isn't anybody's hands on the steering wheel right now. It's just kind of rolling as it is and taking the bumps as it kind of comes along. How what does it look like for a dealership, or I'm really kind of talking to owners right now. This is where I'm kind of going with this, is how can an owner ensure that those hands are on the steering wheel?
Again, I think that you have to do a self-assessment. So whether it's the mirror, as a metaphor or analogy, it is, you have to be honest with yourself. How much do you really know about every part of your business that's happening right now? Not just, how many ROs did we put through the service department last month compared to this month last year? How many new vehicles did we sell this month compared to last month and compared to, the same time last year? Those are all common, right? All the
Yeah.
things that go into a typical 20 group composite, right? Those are all good things to know, but any good general manager and ultimately dealer principal that still stays involved with the business, they know all of those things, which is great. You have to also do the self-assessment of, okay, well, what are all the other components that feed our business? How do we generate
Yeah.
leads, right? So there's a
Like
component
who's
of,
accountable for
yeah,
this stuff, right? I mean, like
yeah,
I just I
that has to tie back to people,
yes.
and then potentially then service providers or vendors. So you have to have an idea of what that ecosystem looks like, and
Mhm.
then there are various compartments. Like you as a marketing expert, you know that part of what you're doing in a marketing strategy is consideration to a brand, right?
Yes.
And some of it is in consideration of advertising, and all of that is part of a marketing strategy. In our industry, I think the internet complicated a lot of things, and I've said this for years. I haven't actually talked about this regularly in a long time. But in our industry, in the auto industry, a lot of times branding and marketing and advertising are all thrown into the same bucket, and people are like, and then this is what we have. It's all kind of the same thing, and it's not at all the
No.
same thing. So for a dealer, when you're talking about, well, what should they do or what's some, understand that you are investing and you get the opportunity. In some cases, if you're in OEM programs, there may be some limitations on how broad you can be in terms of choice and what you want to do, but you still do in most cases have some choices. So you have to be educated enough, you have to be informed enough, you have to like had the initiative to get the knowledge about these things that then define your decision making and lead your decision making. So why do we have this company as our website provider? That's a great question to ask yourself if you've never asked it. If you have your website provider because most other people around in and around the Toronto area have them and it looks pretty good and I like the way aesthetically it pleases my eyes, was that the best choice? Maybe, but the better choice would be, well, we need to vet them based on what's the job of the website. Well, we want it to convert traffic because we spend a whole bunch of money to drive people to that website. And then once they get there, what do we want to do? We want them to call us. We want them to fill out a form. We want them to chat with us, whatever. We want them to convert into an opportunity to do business with them. That's the kind of granular stuff that I think a lot of people at the top that didn't go there or they don't have somebody that helps them, they get exhausted with it because, listen, I say all that and I can say it and it makes it sound like, well, Shaun, you know all this. It's simple and easy, like the back of your hand. So I understand that side too, that it's like, it's not easy. It requires effort, but that essentially is what you'd have to do. It's not just look in the mirror. It's look in the mirror and say, okay, I need to understand all these components. And if I can't do that, is there some other way? Is there another person that I can bring onto my staff that will do that I can have a tremendously deep amount of trust with? Or is there somebody, a source outside that I can say, I need you to help me with this stuff, like strategy, right? I need to know, how do I put that together? But even if you go outside, even if you were to hire Jason Harris to help come in with strategy, you hire Shaun Rains to help with some strategy, or someone other than the two of us, if you bring that person in, don't just have them lay out the plan. Learn from that plan. Why is that? Ask a lot of questions as to why a Shaun Rains would say, evaluate what's going on within the website provider for these reasons and understand that you need to impart. I want to impart that knowledge to a dealer so that now it's theirs, right? My experience, any idea that I have is worthless if I don't share it. So I'm all about abundance. Scarcity means nothing to me because I'm not afraid to compete with anybody on the mother trucking planet. And I want to give all of that as much as I can to my target audience of who I want to help the most, dealers. So if you're a dealer listening to us talk about this, don't just find someone, whether they're already working for you or you hire somebody to help you understand why website choice, why paid search or why not paid search, or how much paid search versus how much investment in organic, in SEO, versus should we do anything with geofencing? Should we do anything with display advertising or remarketing, or should we do some Pandora radio sponsorship? Do we need an outsourced BDC? Is our internal process terrible? Is our turnover rate so high and it's never going to be better because we've got terrible sales management? All of these things that need to be fixed, you actually have to go into each segment, compartmentalize all those things and go into each compartment, and you have to ask the right questions, accumulate the right knowledge, and then figure out where are opportunities to grow. And here's what makes it even more difficult. All of those things can't be done at the same time, and all of them are not equally important to each other, right? One or two of those three things are far more important and critical to your business health than others. So you also have to be able to look at all that stuff and put it in a prioritized order and chase after the stuff that's critically important versus the stuff that's important but not critical.
Instead of just chasing after the shiny stuff, right? I mean, and it kind of sounds like, if we could give the dealers some advice, or a good place to kind of start is creating what I call an accountability tree, right? Really identifying who the hell is actually holding, look, this accountable, that accountable. I mean, look, we're spending tens of thousands of dollars a year, if not sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in CRMs, in our CRM system. We're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in our marketing efforts. We're spending, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. It's all these little places, but I don't necessarily think that at the end of the day, because it's never documented, right? Who's supposed to be holding these accountable within your team? It's like, all right, well, okay, you're holding this portion accountable. You need to hold this portion accountable. I'll hold these guys accountable, but then to your point, we need to educate ourselves enough so that we can hold someone accountable.
One of the things that came from a lot of my more corporate training, and actually one of the things that I have always appreciated about the almost 8 years that I worked for Reynolds and Reynolds, was I got to go through their management training, and I was, much younger guy in those days. But it was very effective, very, very helpful, and very beneficial. And it's one of the things that I still to this day get a lot of mileage out of in helping dealers think through how are they managing staff? How do they handle conflict resolution? How do they understand the different communication profiles of people, right? In big companies, they'll often run people through the personality tests like DISC or like Myers-Briggs type stuff. And then they will utilize that so people know that they're high I followed by D, or whatever the profile is. Now they understand that they can appreciate derailment issues with people that are different than them in terms of, well, maybe they're really conscientious and they're really just like, I just want to stick to the work kind of thing. I don't care what happened on the weekend. If you don't give me details, you're really irritating me. Versus the person who's very social and like, how are you? And they want to know if there's things going on in your life. All of those dynamics kind of play into what I like to talk to dealers about when we're talking about how are you operating from a people perspective and a management perspective, including I like to ask dealers, what is your typical interview sound like, look like, questions that you ask of new salespeople to join your organization? And it's usually, you ever sold cars before? Where'd you sell them at? I work here and here and here. Like, what do you sell a month? Oh, I'm a 10-car guy on average, probably, but I've had 20-car months or whatever. Okay, you're hired. There's some of that. And so when I get into that, the reason why I ask dealers questions like that is because I will say, have you ever considered asking a salesperson, especially one that has sold cars before, are you familiar with CRM tools? Because most guys that have worked in a dealership, of course, you're going to say, of course, yeah. Last dealership you worked at, what CRM did they use? Oh, they used Dealer Stock. They used Vin Solutions, whatever. Okay, great. How many different CRM tools have you used in your car selling experience? Just by name, all of them you can think of. Great. Which one was your favorite? And then play it off as like you're kind of looking around or whatever. But ask them a question like that, because when they tell you their favorite, then you can also say, which ones did you struggle with? Like, we're trying to work through some of that. And when they tell you the ones, because they will tell you the ones that they absolutely hate, or they might, like a lot of salespeople, I freaking hate CRM, man. It's wasting my time. I'm just trying to sell cars. Don't hire that person.
Oh, thanks for the interview. Look at the time. I got to go.
Guy. But how many dealers are asking a question like that? They're not asking a question like that.
Well, that goes down to our cultural shift. There has to be not only is there a leadership change that has to happen as far as creating this accountability tree and then educating ourselves, to be able to hold people accountable. There's some significant ROI in that as well. But to your point, to the team, like, we got to get out of this superstar culture crap, and we got to stop hiring for the 20 car, 30 car, 40 car a month, superstar. And you know what it is? We've been plagued with focusing on nothing but results. And, I find as a pattern, all right, the dealerships that spend more time focusing on the efforts have the better results. What a surprise.
Always.
Right?
You're almost defining how any well trained and operating sales team works. Is they are managing sales effort, right, more so than they are sales results, because the absence of managing the sales effort is the reason why the sales results don't exist.
Exactly. But then they're stuck in this stupid cycle where they're just like, it's like, I don't know. And what's funny is when I think of other verticals, and other industries, we're like one of the last few that are constantly stuck in this, I don't know, this black tar pit of just focus on results, where, it's like everybody, all these other verticals, all these other industries are focusing on the efforts, and by doing so are being more profitable, becoming more recession proof, providing better customer experiences, because I guess when you actually focus on the efforts, your customers also get the benefit of that as well. Sorry, I get fired up about this stuff.
No, and it makes me think too about, when you're talking about, this, accountability inside the dealership. One of the things that I also highly recommend to dealers is please make sure that you're doing at least an annual, but hopefully even a semi-annual review,
Mm.
and have a process for that, have a form for that. In most larger organizations, there's sometimes a quarterly, but always a semi-annual and an annual review. Annual review time is when you, of course, for most people are thinking, well, maybe I get a slight bump in pay, maybe a cost of living increase, but based on your performance, right? There could be other incentives, and it might just be an annual bonus that, hey, man, you hit this number for the year. This was huge because last year we said, hey, man, you did, 100 cars last year. That's great. But your new goal for 2020 is going to be 120 cars. And at the end of 2020, you did 123. Hey, you got above 100% of your goal. So you're getting a $10,000 bonus. If you have a structure like that in play, like, again, when I talk about like, let's run your dealership really professionally, if
Yep.
you actually go through the exercise of putting together those types of plans within how you're managing your people, not only will you probably cut down your turnover, but you'll also develop people into, like, you want to talk about real superstars. They don't have to be like prolific on the internet. They will just become people that your organization was the organization that took people maybe raw and a little rough around the edges and put them through a plan and into a plan of management that makes them better and better and better. So each of those semi-annual review, annual review, you're sitting down and saying, are you below expectations on these things? Are you meeting expectations, exceeding expectations? Are you super outstanding, which is typically the rare category? But if so, those all have a point value, comments that your manager writes up or your supervisor writes up about specific things. It forces, you talk about accountability.
Scorecard.
It forces,
Yeah.
your supervisors and managers now have to participate in actually supervising and managing people, because they're the ones that are going to be responsible for making sure that those people, each person on their team, is being managed and supervised for personal growth and
Yes.
the output we can get from these people. Plus, those people are being given very clear objectives as to how to get better. And when they're wondering, how can I make more money? Or could I work my way into a management position? Or could I go over here and maybe run the BDC? Or could I do this? It's done by that in terms of a process. But again, how many dealerships do you go into that are working it that way? I do know some that are like that, but they're rare.
Yeah, well, you know what though, and I mean, gosh, I could do almost an entire podcast just on pay plans, because you want to talk about diet pills. Oh, okay. Let's make the pay plan actually develop out our team. Let's not develop them. We'll just create a pay plan, and pay plan will do all the work for us, right? But it's focusing. We're paying people on the results and not necessarily their efforts, which is kind of mind-boggling because that doesn't happen in professional sports, right? I mean, it's a team. This is an effort-based thing. I always thought, how cool would it be if every manager and salesperson out there had their own sports card, right? And the back of the sports card had their stats, because it's, yes, the results are on there, but all of your defined efforts are on there as well. And it's like, if you just hand me that baseball card, I flip over the back. Yeah, I want you on my team. Like,
Let's go ahead and do that in the vendor world too.
oh, good
All the
point.
people
100%. Yeah.
I'm the best salesperson this industry's ever seen. I can sell your websites. I can sell your digital marketing services. I can sell your widget this, your shiny new button that. I can sell your selling tool, really. And then we look on the back of their sports card and we were like, man, they had one awesome year. What's up with that? One awesome year. The rest of it's like,
Yep.
they're below the Mendoza line, which is not where you want to be. And so that one year, and you look a little bit more and you're like, oh, I was in that one year. That's the first year the such and such provider that I worked for got this massive deal with this huge manufacturer, and they immediately got 752 dealers. So you were shooting fish in a barrel for a year. And I
Pretty
guess
much.
everybody else that was on the sales team that year at that company looked like $1,000,000 too. And then reality hit.
Yep.
Like, that would be funny. I would love
It
that.
would be awesome. But to your point, right? I mean, hiring, training, coaching, and creating culture on efforts rather than results. I feel like the dealerships that do that, and there are some that do. I mean, there are.
Mhm.
Man, it is so freaking obvious. I mean, it's almost so obvious that you can walk into the dealership and actually see it. You know,
Oh yeah,
it's whatever changes they made or whatever modifications they made, it's just you can tell that there's a passion there. Hey,
yeah,
Shaun, thank you so much for jamming with me today, man. This has been great, and I know we could easily go for a couple more hours. But
sure.
hey, for everybody out there that's listening or watching right now, but would love to learn more about what you're doing, what is the best way for them to connect with you?
Um, I purposely keep my website pretty vague, right? But you can go to dealersuperhero.com. There are numbers and email addresses. But if you want to expedite all of that, I would just tell them that if it email is your preference, it's Shaun, as long as you spell it right, SHAUN at dealersuperhero.com. Do you give out cell phone numbers if people are
Go for it, dude.
comfortable?
Absolutely.
So you can also text or call me directly. My personal line at 214-934-6964. You can easily find me on LinkedIn. You can also find me on Facebook pretty easily. So any of those avenues. And then obviously, if you know Jason, if you're well connected with Jason and what he's
Reach
doing,
out to me.
he can put you in touch with me as well.
Shaun, I'm so glad that we were able to make this happen and connect. I mean,
Me
dude,
too.
your passion and your authenticity and just your drive to want to help, dealers and others just fucking do better at the end of the day has just been awesome. Thanks again so much for taking the time to jam with me today. This was a lot of fun.
It's been my pleasure, Jason. Thanks for having me.